Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're standing under a sky that looks hand-torn streetlights flickering like nervous fireflies. Sirens fading into the kind of hush that makes neighborhoods hold their breath. And the wind still combing the trees backward as if trying to unsay what it just did. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like seeing our little constellation of night owls. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan hum in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The tornado touched down with the jittery decisiveness of a rumor that finally got an audience. 1 minute my kitchen window held a polite April, the next the glass bowed like a courtesy to a very rude guest. I remember the crawlspace dust tasting like pennies, the radio saying words in the wrong order rotation, debris, seek in my hands, stubborn as old hinges, pulling the emergency tote I always swore I'd never need. When the siren sighed into distance and the air forgot how to scream, I climbed out and found the sky had finished a terrible chore. My house was peeled to its studs. My porch swing had learned to fly, and the letters of my last name were scattered across the lawn as if the alphabet had proposed to me and run. I stood in a street arranged by accident roofs behaving like confetti, fences performing new geometry, neighbors doing that soft roll call you do after shared fear, you good. I was. In the technical sense, alive and upright. In the human sense, I was a woman holding 3 plastic bags, a toolbox, and the sound of a door that no longer existed. I said, "Evelyn, you can cry later." And the wind, decent for once, pretended not to hear. Light joke 1, whispered to the chunk of porch rail in my hand. "We had a good run, kid." The rail agreed by doing nothing dramatic. The afternoon folded into a logistics parade, firefighters counting houses, an insurance guy blinking like a man who met his job on a dare, and volunteers handing out bottled water with the unshowy tenderness of people who've practiced this choreography before. I salvaged what I could 3 dresses that smelled like fiberglass and memory. My mother's recipe tin. A photo of me at 18 believing storms were metaphors. When the sun finally lost patience. I did the thing you do when your brain wants a sentence that ends. I drove to my son's place. Miles had moved into a gated development with immaculate hedges that look like they hold their breaths for HOA newsletters. I used my spare code, parked at the curb, and stood on his porch rehearsing the 2 words, "I hate needing help me." The porch light came on like a stage cue. The door opened. Sloan, his girlfriend, filled the doorway in a sweater that belonged to a magazine and a smile that belonged to customer service. "Evelyn," she said, as if discovering a package addressed incorrectly. "Oh, I lifted my bags," which made the kind of clinking sound that tells a story against your will. Tornado. House is not a house. Could I? The hallway behind her looked warm enough to cure several kinds of sorrow. Miles appeared, hair damp, phone glowing like a permission slip. "Mom," he said, his mouth trying to be both kind and neat. "We want privacy. My therapist says boundaries are healthy." He said it gently, which somehow made the sentence heavier. "We can help you find a place." A place. Like grief can be outsourced to a zip code. "Just for a couple nights?" I asked, and heard myself sounding like I'd pressed the wrong elevator button. Sloan's smile did a slow exhale. "We're in a routine, and my sleep is delicate." That word delicate stood in the doorway with better shoes than mine. Miles touched my elbow as if to authenticate his concern. "I'll Venmo you," he whispered, as if money were a blanket with arms. I nodded because the alternative involved explaining the physics of doorways to two people who honestly believed they were practicing self-care. Elder wisdom reflection. Boundaries are fences you build around yourself, not moats you dig around someone else's need. If your boundary makes you warm and the person you love colder, it might be a costume for avoidance. Build doors, not drawbridges. I told him I loved him, because that part was still true. And I said, "I'll text you tomorrow," he said. "We'll check in, the way people do when they mean it and also mean to sleep well." Sloan offered a bag of grain-free pretzels, which is precisely the kind of gift that makes you both grateful and a little lonelier. I took them, because I'm polite and because salt is salt even when it's curated. "We really do want privacy," she added, as though the word were a moral vitamin. "Of course," I said. "And I want a roof." Light joke too, softened with a shrug, because I did not trust my voice to lift anything heavier. Back in the car. The night turned up the volume on Small Humiliations, a shampoo sample exploding just enough to perfume the dashboard with coconut ambition. The seatbelt deciding I was an experiment in friction. My phone's battery performing a low blood sugar feint. I parked behind a grocery store where the dumpsters smell like every picnic you've ever regretted. Cracked the window and let the engine sleep. There is a precise silence that belongs to parking lots, fluorescents making their own weather. Shopping carts rehearsing escape. A teenager practicing the saxophone of bad decisions 2 blocks away. I ate 3 pretzels and a granola bar that believed in oats more than I did. I counted my quarters. I counted them again. Suddenly math, like weather, seemed personal. Quirky sidebar after major storms. The power grid sometimes hums a half step higher than usual, transformers carrying load for their tired neighbors. You can hear it if you stand under the right pole at 2 a.m. It sounds like bees reciting policy. Humans do something similar. We carry a friend's hour when theirs collapses. It's not heroic, it's municipal. I scrolled my contacts for a noun that felt like shelter. Most of my recent calls were to doctors, insurers, and my hairdresser, who, while excellent with fringe, cannot negotiate with wind. Somewhere near the back of my wallet, I knew. Lived a piece of paper older than many of my grudges, a business card the color of stormlight with a phone number stamped in ink that had learned patience. Jack Mercer. High school first love turned what if turned Christmas card stranger, he'd once said. If we ever get lost again, pin me with a number at 25. It sounded like poetry. At 68, it sounded like logistics. Academic phrase of the day. Social capital public argument that relationships are resources. Networks are safety nets. And sometimes your survival is the distance between your need and a phone number you can still dial. There's a debate about fairness and access. I honor it. Tonight, from a parking lot where my pride was trying to be a blanket, I honored survival, too. I didn't call. Not yet. That was a tomorrow thing. After coffee and dignity and maybe a courage I could pour like something warm. I locked the doors, checked the rear view for a better version of myself, and leaned the seat back until it negotiated with my spine. The car smelled like coconut and new plans. I put the recipe tin on the passenger seat because it deserved somewhere to sit that was not my lap. Light joke 3. To the tin. You're the only thing in this car qualified to make a home. The tin refused to disagree. The night settled into its bureaucratic rhythm, far-off sirens taking attendance. The grid humming its tired hymn. A stray cat giving the moon a performance review. I made a list for morning the free shower at the YMCA, the insurance adjuster's message, the thrift store that opens early enough to sell a blanket to a woman who says, just looking. And then, because my great-grandmother believed in prayers that sound like instructions, I wrote on a receipt with a borrowed pen, find coffee, Find number. Find yes. I watched the horizon consider light and decided to practice sleeping while the day made up its mind. The car, decent host that it is, held me without speeches. Somewhere, a streetlight clicked off, offended by dawn. I tucked the storm story under my tongue, not to forget it, but so I could tell it later without needing to bleed. Morning seeped into the parking lot like it was clocking in fluorescence, surrendering one by one. A delivery truck coughing its way toward usefulness. A gull lecturing a French fry with managerial zeal. I folded the blanket that wasn't two sweaters zipped together and told my spine we'd negotiate later. The recipe tin watched from the passenger seat like a chaperone with better instincts than mine. First, coffee. The YMCA opened at 6 with the merciful democracy of a place that believes sweat is a civic duty. A volunteer nodded me toward a day pass. I nodded back with that post-disaster politeness you develop when your dignity is tucked under your arm like a towel. In the locker room, steam made everything equal grief, triumph. The woman singing to herself in the next shower stall. I let hot water write a calmer paragraph on my shoulders and practice sentences I could live with. I need help. Not forever. Just for now. Dressed in thrift store competence jeans that didn't broadcast yesterday and a navy t-shirt that believed in second chances, I bought a coffee from the kind of diner that knows everybody's bad day and still fries an egg with ceremony. I borrowed a ballpoint to write a list on the back of a receipt insurance call. Red Cross intake. Storage box hunt. Phone charger. Courage. The pen had teeth marks. Somehow that helped. Other people had survived their lists with this exact pen. I could too. It was normal to want my son, normal, and not helpful. Miles's last text glowed on my screen like an index card for a class I didn't sign up for. Love you. We'll check in. Boundaries, I typed. Deleted. Sometimes love is a door you close gently for both of you. So I took out the card the storm had left me. Jack Mercer, his name still the shape of 19 in my mouth. His number printed in ink that had learned patience. I stared until the digits steadied. Then I called. Mercer. A voice answered lower now. With the grain I remembered from car radios and long ago porches. Jack, I said. And the world did that small, delicate wobble it does when you open an old window. It's Evelyn, a breath, not surprise. Exactly recognition loosening a knot. Ev, he said. The vowel still kind. Are you all right? I'm vertical, I said. The house isn't. I'm between roofs. Text me your PIN, he said. I'm coming now. No speech. No pity. Logistics like a blanket. I sent the cross streets and the name of the diner. My hands shook the way hands do when the body realizes it might rest soon. Quirky sidebar in disasters. The body hoards decisions the way we hoard batteries, tiny. Practical choices that add up to something like a day. It's called micro-restoration in some emergency handbooks. Make one corner clean. 1 cup hot, 1 phone charged. Your nervous system will begin to believe you again. While I waited, I watched the parking lot perform its municipal opera, UPS Brown. School bus yellow. The small ballet of carts corralled by a teenager who'd learned patience without being thanked for it. A stray dog read the morning paper in smell. I sipped slow so the coffee could rehearse calm inside me. He pulled up in a midnight SUV that didn't announce itself. The kind of car old money buys when it's learned subtlety. Jack stepped out in a gray sweater and jeans that understood weekends. Time had drawn on his face with a sharpened pencil but left room for the original joke. He crossed the pavement like he'd been practicing this exact distance for years. You look beautiful, he said, soft, the way you say a long truth without needing it to do tricks. I snorted once, which is my body's defense against sentences with cheekbones. I smell like laundry rooms and resolve, I said. Light joke 1. Because humor is just breath that learned to step sideways. He didn't reach for me. He opened the passenger door like he remembered that choices are oxygen. "Let me get you somewhere quiet," he said. "Then we'll plan." That word plan was the first warm towel anyone had handed me all night. I slid the recipe tin onto my lap like a passenger that paid full fare. We drove with the radio low. A weather update pretending to be music. "I saw photos," he said. "Your street looked like a sentence somebody erased with their fist." "Accurate," I said. "The alphabet is reconsidering me. It won't," he said. Not like reassurance, but like a forecast from a reliable app. It'll retype you in bold. We passed Miles's development. Hedges pruned into obedience. I didn't point. There are some GPS pins a heart learns to ignore on purpose. Instead, I told him about Sloane's delicate sleep and Miles's careful therapist words, and how their care had a moat around it. Jack grimaced. Not at them, but at the idea. "Boundaries," he said. "Should look like gates, not walls." "Exactly," I said, and felt less alone inside my own sentence. Academic phrase of the day, ambiguous loss. The public argument that sometimes what you grieve is not gone, but unavailable a parent with dementia. A marriage with silence where the vows used to be. A son who loves you and closes a door. The mind struggles because there's no funeral for maybe. Practitioners recommend rituals that acknowledge the both and. I bought a cheap candle later for that purpose, and it behaved better than some people did. His place was not a mansion, it was competence with trees. A long drive that minded its own business. A low house with windows like eyelids that know how to rest. Inside smelled like cedar and citrus and a man who cooks on purpose. He put my bags in a small guest room where the quilt had domestic authority. "Bathroom's there," he said. "Towels in the warmer. Take your time. A warmer." I almost cried at the idea that heat could be scheduled. In the kitchen. Everything had a place and nothing auditioned. He set water to boil, took tea bags from a tin like they were allies, and put honey on a tray because he's the kind of man who knows sweet things need company. "Tell me the list," he said. I unfolded the receipt with its tired pen marks. Insurance. Red Cross. A storage unit for the salvage crew. A phone charger. A human being who will answer the phone after 5 p.m. "I can be the human," he said simply. "And Elena, the woman who runs my office, can be another. We'll triage, we'll calendar." He slid a legal pad toward me. "You write, I'll dial." Elder wisdom reflection. When the day feels like a braided rope of panic, you don't untangle it by yanking. You take one strand call. Cup, nap, form, and make it behave. Then the next. Soon the rope remembers it was never a snake. We worked. He put hold music on speaker so I wouldn't feel alone, while an insurer thanked me for my patience for the 12th time. He said, "Hi, this is Jack on behalf of Evelyn Hart," in a tone that made bureaucracy straighten its tie. He did not speak for me. He held the line while I took my turn. When I faltered, he refilled the kettle. There are men who make speeches about rescue, and men who bring warm cups to the table while you rescue yourself. The second kind is rarer than it should be. Quirky fact, the average disaster claim involves over 30 distinct phone calls adjusters, contractors, utilities, relief agencies, each with its own hold music and secret password. Researchers call the resulting fatigue administrative burden. It's not just paperwork, it's energy theft. The antidote is shared minutes someone else on the second line while you remember to breathe. By midday, we had a FEMA case number, a storage unit, and a volunteer crew scheduled to sift the debris with more respect than the wind had shown. Jack's assistant texted to say she'd sourced work boots in my size and a charger that wasn't 3 breaths from death. Jack made soup, not fancy chicken. Lemon. Rice, but the steam wrote a gentler weather report on my face. I ate like a person whose body had not yet caught up with her gratitude. He waited until the bowl was empty before he asked about Miles. "Do you want me to call him no?" I said. "I want him to call me when he remembers his gate has hinges. Light joke too, small and survivable. But I should text. Something true." Jack nodded. "Draft it here," he said. "On paper, where urgency can't backspace." I wrote alive, housed with a friend. Logistics in motion. I'll send a list if there's a task you want. Love you. I did not add boundaries. He already had them. I sent it. The typing dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared like a weather app with commitment issues. His reply, "Love you. Glad you're safe. We'll check in." I set the phone down and let the sentence be exactly what it was. Not enough. Not nothing. Afternoon tilted toward repairs. Jack took me to a quiet room with a window on the pond and handed me a sweater that knew my shoulders. "Nap," he said, with the authority of a doctor who prescribes clouds. "Then we go see what the storm left you." I lay down under a quilt that had never met a tornado and let sleep interview me for the job of tomorrow. When I woke, the light was warm butter, and my phone had learned manners. A new text glowed from an unknown number Sloan here, sending a Venmo for a hotel. Privacy is important for everyone. I put the phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling where a tiny crack admitted imperfection with dignity. Privacy, I said to the quiet, is a door you can lock from the inside, not one you hold shut in someone else's face. Light joke 3. To myself. Softer than air, I'll embroider it, frame it, and ship it to her with instructions. Jack knocked gently and peeked in. Boots are by the door, ready to go, see what we can save. I stood, inserting my feet into a pair of shoes that looked like they could hold me up if the ground decided to be experimental again. "Ready," I said. The recipe tin waited on the dresser like a passport. I tucked it under my arm. We stepped into the kind of afternoon that has decided to apologize for its morning. And the road unrolled ahead of us like a plan. The road back to the neighborhood wore last night's story like a bruised utility trucks idling with their orange patience. Sawhorses making polite detours. Volunteers in bright vests moving like a school of resolve. Jack parked on the edge of what used to be my block and cut the engine so the quiet could report in. Sawdust in the air. Insulation confetti stuck to weeping willows. The clink and thud of people lifting the day into something livable. We stood a moment with our hands on the hood, as if blessing the attempt. My lot had learned minimalism overnight. The porch steps remained, theatrical about their survival, the tub tilted in the yard like a ship dreaming of dignity. A volunteer coordinator in a ball-cap MEI, stitched on with thread that trusted its letters, greeted us with the gentleness of someone who knows how to speak around ruin. "You, Evelyn?" she asked. I nodded. "I've got gloves, masks, and 3 people who make piles behave. Keep, toss, maybe." She pointed with her clipboard. "We follow your pace." Jack tugged on work gloves. I slipped into mine and felt my fingers translate grief into nouns. "Okay," I said to the open sky. "Let's find the heartbeat." The recipe tin I'd carried to his house sat safe in the SUV. My pockets held Ziplocs for small miracles and a Sharpie for labeling hope. We started where kitchens are trained to begin, by the fridge, which had performed its final opera in the night. May taped it shut with blue painter's tape and wrote in block letters, "Do not open science inside." Light joke 1. Offered to the dead appliance. "You kept secrets. I'll respect that." May grinned. Best friends take some truths to the dump. The keyboard tossed, maybe ballet commenced. Tiles lifted like shy teeth. Spoons turned up in corners as if they'd been holding hands. We found the tin of buttons from my mother's sewing basket, and I swear the jar sounded relieved when I twisted the lid and let air remember its job. A neighbor's photo album had sailed in and landed under what used to be my dining chair. May took a picture of the family on the first page and texted it to a volunteer group that specializes in lost photographs. "We call it reunions," she said. "Quirky sidebar after tornadoes." Facebook fills with pages where strangers return snapshots. People recognize a grandpa by his shirt collar or a birthday cake with a misspelled name, Paper, it turns out. Has a better GPS than most of us. The insurance adjuster arrived, shirt tucked in the way rules imagine shirts should be. Jack handled the nouns with him, so I could keep choosing which objects got to follow me into the next version of home. "Square footage of loss," the adjuster said. "Replacement value," Jack answered. They spoke a dialect that lets grief sit in the back row without raising its hand. From the garden beds. A small defiance the rosemary had been flattened, then thought better of it. I pinched a sprig and let the oil write a calmer sentence under my nose. "Remembrance," I told it. The plant declined to perform. It simply continued. Miles texted, driving past, "Can we stop?" I looked up. Farther down the block, a white SUV idled, undecided. "Yes," I typed. 5 minutes. Work gloves recommended. He arrived with Sloane in leggings that were allergic to dirt and a face that wanted to audition for concern. Miles hugged me. "Quick." As if the wind might still be listening. "We brought snacks," he said, revealing a bag of protein bars that believed in quinoa. "Thank you," I said, "because gratitude doesn't require a dress code." Sloane surveyed the lot like a museum that needed better curation. "Oh, wow," she said, words stepping delicately. "This is a lot." "It is," I agreed, spotting the toolbox Jack had salvaged intact. I opened it and found my father's old level. The bubble still honest. I held it up. "We're borrowing its personality." Light joke too, mostly for my ribs. May asked if we wanted a debris sifter, a framed screen on sawhorses that catches buttons, rings, coins, little proofs of life. We sifted. The mesh sang softly as sand fell through. And then ping, a small gold hoop. One of the earrings I'd given myself for turning 60, I held it like punctuation. Sloane's eyes softened in a way I trusted. "That's beautiful," she said. And for a heartbeat, she was just a woman admiring survival. Academic phrase of the day. Social infrastructure. The public argument that the health of a community depends on its places and networks as much as its roads, libraries. Diners, front porches, churches, YMCAs, in disasters. It's the difference between isolation and a list of phone numbers that answer, today. It looked like May's clipboard, the YMCA shower, the diner coffee, and Jack's kitchen making room for my suitcase. We found other small loyalties, the cufflink from Owen's jacket pocket. It had once lived a different story. Now it's just an object that held on. The brass key that no longer had a door but still knew its shape. A scratched saucepan that had survived, not because it was sturdy, but because it had been in the sink at exactly the right angle. Jack wrapped each keep in old t-shirts and labeled the boxes with beautiful block letters, as if handwriting could be architecture. Miles tried to lift a beam. Jack redirected him to buckets where he could be useful without doing math against his spine. Sloane hovered. "We can still send you money," she offered, "like a life raft with very clean upholstery." I nodded. "And I'll send you tasks," I said. "That don't require you to spend your sleep." I handed her a list called the shelter about donated storage bins. Compile a neighborhood spreadsheet of lost, found items. Bring lemon bars to the volunteer table on Saturday. She blinked. Then accepted the paper the way you accept a baby at a baptism careful. Surprised. A little relieved to have something concrete to hold. Elder wisdom reflection when people who said no want to help later. Give them a job with edges. Boundaries without bitterness turn apologies into muscle. By noon, our keep pile looked like a modest biography. May called a break and waved us toward the relief tent. Soup in paper cups. Bread that didn't apologize for being bread. A folding table with Sharpies and index cards for labeling. A teen in a neon vest offered me sunscreen like she was handing out gold stars. I sat and let my breath discover it had other hobbies. Jack watched me the way men watch thermostats, attentive, ready to keep the room honest. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm learning how to be a person whose house is in progress," I said. The sentence feels longer than it used to. He squeezed my shoulder. "Long sentences hold more clauses," he said. "Light joke 3? I smiled despite the grammar. A city worker chalked utility marks on the curb: red for power, yellow for gas, blue for water, an urban rainbow with a job. Quirky fact, those colors are standardized by a code so ubiquitous that toddlers learn them without knowing. And dig crews dream in them. You can read a street's veins if you know the palette. Today, the lines felt like a promise that the invisible was being mapped back into service. The adjuster returned with his tablet and a verdict shaped like numbers. "We'll authorize emergency funds this afternoon," he said. "Lodging for 30 days, storage, debris removal, rebuild estimate to follow." He looked at the keep pile as if it had feelings. "I'm sorry for your loss," he added. And for once, the phrase sounded like a person, not a script. Jack shook his hand as if shaking hands with the system itself. "We appreciate speed where it belongs," he said. Miles eyed the time. "We need to head out," he murmured. "Therapy at 3. I hugged him again. "Longer." "I'm glad you're taking care of your brain," I said. "Mine's in line behind yours." He nodded, eyes wet, then surprised me with a sentence that felt like a hinge deciding it could change careers. "We have a guest room," he said slowly, "for laundry days and naps if you want a bed between now and the rebuild sometimes." He glanced at Sloane. She looked at me, then at my glove, then back. "We'll adjust," she said. "Privacy can share." The word didn't wear better shoes this time. It wore flats and offered to walk. I said, "Maybe next week." Because generosity also needs pacing. "Bring lemon bars Saturday," I added. "The tent earns them." Sloane smiled a human, not a brochure, and nodded. As the afternoon thinned, we found a final treasure, a Polaroid of me and 19-year-old Jack, brown hair and bravado, sitting on the hood of a car that believed in summer. The image had been sandblasted by air, but our faces held. I handed it to him without ceremony. "Look what refused to get lost," I said. He laughed in that way you remember with your ribs. "Frame it," he said. "Put it next to the new door when we build." We loaded the SUV with the labeled boxes. May took the toss pile to the curb with the tenderness of a nurse changing a dressing. "We'll be back tomorrow," she said. "Same time. Your Rosemary's a fighter. We named it Joan." I thanked her with a grip that meant what the whole day meant: you saved me 10,000 small collapses. On the drive back, we were quiet the way people are when their ears have worked overtime. I practiced my list for the evening shower, calendaring the rebuild steps, a call to the Red Cross to ask about tarps, and one small ceremony to teach my nervous system that this is survivable. At Jack's. I lit the cheap candle I'd bought for ambiguous loss and placed it beside the recipe tin. For the things I loved that were still here. For the things gone that left gentler versions behind. For the door that will exist again. Before sleep, I wrote 3 lines and taped them to the inside of my temporary closet. The house is not gone. It's in parts and promises. Privacy is a door I can share, not a door I have to fight. Tomorrow's job is 1 corner, 1 call, 1 cup. The night agreed by doing nothing dramatic. Outside. The pond kept its quiet appointment with the moon. Inside. The quilt made a convincing argument for staying, and in the space where a roof used to be. I felt the outline of a roof returning measured, budgeted, bracketed, kind. The next morning opened like a clipboard square, practical, already numbered. Jack brewed coffee that smelled like competence, and I spread yesterday's receipts beside his legal pad until the table looked like a map with snacks. May's crew would be back at 10. The adjuster had promised emergency disbursement by close of business, which in insurance dialect means the sun may set twice. I put patients on the list between tarps and tetanus shot. We started with phone calls. The duet we'd learned, he wrangled hold music. I answered questions with nouns. FEMA case number recited, storage unit confirmed, mail forwarded to a P.O. box that had never expected so much biography. Jack's assistant Elena texted contractor shortlist attached, all licensed. No cousin with a YouTube degree. Light joke one, I told Jack that licensed was my new love language. He toasted to legal affection. At 9:30, we drove to the lot with 2 folding chairs, a roll of blue painter's tape, and lemon bars because Sloan had replied to the assignment like a student who suddenly wants extra credit. The relief tent had learned our names. A volunteer with a clipboard asked if we needed a runner, someone who finds screws, gloves. A left-handed hammer if such a unicorn exists. We need a left-handed hammer. Jack deadpanned. The runner blinked, grinned, and brought us bottled water instead, which was the right answer. Mee greeted us in her cap and authority. "We made you a temporary fence," she said, pointing to caution tape strung like a modest necklace around the perimeter. "Keeps lookers from becoming helpers without permission." The keeps are tossed, maybe ballet resumed with yesterday's muscle memory and today's upgrades. We sifted. We labeled. We gave the wind back everything it insisted on owning. The Rosemary newly christened Jones stood there, like a tired soprano refusing to leave the stage. Miles arrived precisely at 10 with those lemon bars. Sloan in tow and underdressed for a mud date, but trying. She set the pan on the volunteer table. The teenagers in neon vests fell in love. They asked for the recipe. Sloan said, cheeks pink, voice less curated. I wrote it on an index card, with my number for bin pickup coordination. There it was, the gate where a wall had been. I handed her fresh tasks. "Can you call utilities about meter pulls and get me the form for temporary power, and ask the library about a room for Saturday neighbors, need a place to share lists?" She nodded with relief. Boundaries, it turns out, are merciful when they come with clipboards. Elder wisdom reflection. When people finally ask, "How can I help?" answer with a verb that has edges. Bring a pan to the tent. Take 3 photos and post to the reunion page. Hold the phone while I breathe. Vague mercy exhausts. Specific mercy organizes. The adjuster materialized around 11. Tablet in hand, hat in hand too, in a way that passed my test for actual sorrow. "Funds released," he said. "Email in your inbox, prepaid card at the tent." He looked at Joan. "You naming the plants that one earned it," I said. He touched his brim like a man greeting a veteran. Jack handled the numbers while I inventoried what the storm hadn't learned to steal a dented Dutch oven, still good. A drawer of tidy rubber bands, optimistic. A jar of beach sand from a long-ago trip we had insisted wasn't a test of anything it had been. Quirky sidebar after big storms. The U.S. Army Corps runs the Operation Blue Roof program. Those blue tarps you see stapled across miles of neighborhoods are officially plastic sheeting. Requested by form and installed by crews who treat staples like stitches. A tarp is not a roof, but it's a promise that one is coming. Just after noon, the contractor shortlist arrived like polite cavalry Miss Ortiz, who specializes in rebuilds and doesn't talk over women, Harlan, whose references said shows up on Tuesday when he says Tuesday, and one firm with a glossy brochure we threw out because grief has no time for aerial photography of other people's roofs. We called Ortiz. She answered her phone herself. Which I have decided is character in a ringtone. Walk me through your bones, she said, and walked the lot with a pencil and a tape measure like she was flirting with the future. We'll do tornado straps, elevate outlets, rethink the roofline for the way wind actually behaves on this block, she murmured. She spoke fluent delay permit lag. Fluent honesty drywall hates impatience. And fluent hope we can frame before first frost if you like soup and decisions. Light joke too. I told her I would name a stew after her if she beat the frost. Make it with cumin, she said. I work for cumin. Sloan returned triumphantly with a printed utilities checklist and the library room confirmed. Saturday, 2 to 4, community room B, she said, holding her phone like a good grade. Miss Lee says, bring tape and kindness. I wrote on the volunteer board. SAT neighbor, scripts, lost, found. Bin runs, meal rotation, rebuild questions, no drama. May added a smiley and the words index cards provided. Because she knows libraries like I know Rosemary. By 2. The sun argued with our necks. And we took our folding chairs to the shade of a surviving maple. Miles sat on a cooler like a man who had figured out where usefulness lives between his mother and a list. I'm sorry, he said. Not the night of sorry, but the type that knows it owes chores. We put privacy in front of kindness. Sloan nodded, throat shiny. My therapist says privacy without generosity is isolation, she offered. I am updating my vocabulary. We passed a lemon bar, like communion, and let the sentence be the service. Academic phrase of the day, mutual aid, the public argument that in crises, communities don't wait for institutions, they self-organize soup lines, cash apps, rides, rooms, spreadsheets. Scholars debate sustainability and equity in parking lots. We call it, I've got you until the form catches up. Tonight. Our version looked like teenagers handing out sunscreen. Miss Ortiz measuring respect into the frame, and Sloan running a spreadsheet with the fervor of a convert. Back at Jack's near 4. Elena had left a neat stack on the kitchen island temporary housing options if I didn't want to impose forever. A list of used furniture outlets. A printout titled Post-Disaster Mail Hacks. And a sticky note that said, Tamper-evident bins arrive tomorrow. She does admin like other people do jazz. I wrote her a thank you on an index card because gratitude with postage is my native religion. We sat with Miss Ortiz to talk money. The bluntest kindness. Insurance covers this much, she said, tapping the line. FEMA covers that much. But likes to argue, my labor is here. Materials are a mess. But I'll fight vendors like they owe me an apology. She handed me a schedule that didn't overpromise. Week 1, demo and debris haul. Week 2. Framing begins if nails and weather cooperate. You'll hate weeks 3 and 4. They look like nothing's happening. That's inspection and supplies. Trust the boring. Jack asked about deposits and draws. She answered with percentages that could withstand a calculator. I signed the intent to proceed with a pen that felt like it understood vows. Light joke. 3. As we wrapped, if a contractor ever tells me should be done by Thursday, I will require notarized Thursday. Miss Ortiz laughed from her diaphragm. Make it 2 Thursdays and we have a deal. We drove past Halter Creek on the way home because quiet heroism needs inventory. Rio's shelf had grown cocoa packets multiplied, a roll of quarters with a note for laundromat emergencies, and new packs of baby wipes labeled for field hands. Chet blushed at the thank yous and pretended he didn't. We added lemon bars to the shelf and a scribbled sign, "Your receipts live here." A trucker in a ball cap tapped the sign and said, "Amen," like a man who has slept in cabs and understands time zones of kindness. Back at the house, that isn't yet. We taped a copy of the Saturday flyer to the surviving maple and another to the relief tent's pole community room B24. Bring a list. Take a job. No door politics. We left a stack of index cards with a Sharpie and a title questions we'll answer together. Some already had handwriting: where to get tetanus shot, who has a shop vac, can someone find Mr. Lopez's cat? The neighborhood had begun to take attendance out loud. Evening came on with good posture. Jack roasted a chicken the way engineers roast timers. Thermometers. Smug sigh when the juices ran clear. I showered until the day's grit filed itself. Miles texted a photo of Community Room B with tables set and tape dispensed like party favors. Sloan added 3 lemon emojis and 1 toolbox, which is, frankly, poetry. Miss Ortiz sent a thumbs up with a bracket delivery window. Elena messaged Blue Roof app link here, if you want the official tarp. And a winking note: I also found peonies on sale. 15% off. Let Jack buy them. Hobbies are good for men who measure. I laughed aloud in a way that made my lungs look around and say, oh, we remember this. Before sleep, I copied 3 lines to the inside of the guest room closet again, upgrading them for a day that had earned brighter ink. Trust the boring. It built the bridge you're walking. Give apologies jobs. Give mercy clipboards. Lemon bars are legal tender at the end of the world. I stood a moment at the window and watched the pawn practice being a mirror. The house exhaled as if invited. Somewhere. Joan the rosemary folded in its green and decided to see us tomorrow. I let the new roof outline itself behind my eyelids, rafters like ribs, straps like sentences. A door that swings because it has a frame and a town that agreed to hold it steady while the hinges learn their hymn. Saturday carried the cheerful competence of a good stapler click. Secure. Next, we set up Community Room B with the reverence of people who know lists save lives tables, index cards, a pot of coffee that tasted like municipal courage, and a sign in Miss Lee's tidy hand: bring a list, take a job, no door politics. Jack arranged chairs in a horseshoe so sentences would face one another instead of ricocheting off walls. Sloan arrived early with lemon bars and a laptop, hair in a work bun that said yes without ceremony. Miles hauled folding tables with the grunt of a man apprenticing to his apology. Neighbors trickled in, carrying plastic bins of maybe and eyes that had learned new verbs. May parked her clipboard like a small altar. We'll do 4 stations, she said. Lost and found, bin runs, meal rotations, rebuild questions. She pointed at me. You open. You're good at nouns. So I did. Voice set to calm weather. We're here to trade overwhelm for edges, I said. Name a need in 1 line. Volunteers will give it a job and a time. It wasn't stirring, it was instructive. The room exhaled like a choir of lungs that had been waiting for a conductor who believed in breathing first. We started at Lost and Found. Mr. Lopez held up a photo of his cat, Dulce, who wears her whiskers like an opinion. A teen in a neon vest wrote, "Look under porches at dusk," and added her number. At bin runs, Sloan allocated storage tubs by street, fingers flying, jaw set in friendly precision. 2 for Cedar, 3 for Sunnyside. She murmured. She didn't give speeches about privacy or boundaries. She handed out lids. It turns out repentance looks best in logistics. Light joke 1, I told the room my superpower was labeling, but I'd accept backup in the form of tape. A retiree named Earl raised his hand solemnly. I brought a dispenser, he said. Producing one like a magician unveiling a dove, the room applauded tape, which tells you everything about our mood. At Rebuild Questions, Miss Ortiz drew a quick roof on a whiteboard like a teacher who trusts triangles. We'll strap rafters, we'll overnail sheathing, we'll anchor for the wind we actually get. Not the brochure kind, she said. Yes. Permits are slow. Yes. We plan around inspectors' golf games. No. I will not lie to you about drywall drying. She made honesty sound like a gasket unsexy. Essential. I signed a stack intent to proceed. Debris haul. Temporary power feeling like a mayor of a very small city with 1 household and a ferocious rosemary named Joan. quirky sidebar, those blue shop towels everybody loves. They're cellulose with the secret longer fibers that don't shred when you ask them to be heroes. A 1970s paper engineer invented them for garages and accidentally saved 1,000 kitchens. Earl donated 3 rolls. I knighted him with 1. Midway through, Elena swept in with clipboards and a portable printer that behaved like a well-raised child. Forms, scripts, and the blue roof request, she announced. Setting up a micro-bureaucracy in the corner, I also have a template for neighbor spreadsheets. It autofills phone trees. Miss Lee, the librarian who runs this town without saying so, stuck up a fresh sign, "Write legibly. Your future self will thank you." We did. Academic phrase of the day. Civic capacity. The public argument that a town's ability to recover rests not just on budget and trucks, but on relationships, routines, and the boring middle layer where churches, libraries, and diners pass messages faster than any formal memo today. Ours looked like May's stations, Miss Lee's tape, Elena's portable printer, and a lemon bar economy that kept morale solvent. We broke for coffee. Miles slid onto the chair beside me like he was trying not to scare the furniture. "Mom," he said quietly, "Sloan signed us up to run bin runs through Wednesday." He looked at his hands. "I didn't make that choice. She did." He didn't smile like a man who wanted credit. He reported like a citizen. "Good," I said. "Let the doing teach the feeling." His shoulders did a small, generous slump. "I'm learning that boundaries work better when they include doors." We clinked paper cups the way diplomats might clink treaties. Across the room, Sloan explained the spreadsheet to Earl with patience that made me proud of someone I don't always understand. Elder wisdom reflection when a person offers changed behavior. Believe the behavior, not your bruised expectation. Let the new pattern carry a box before you decide whether it can carry your trust. After lunch, I read my statement for tomorrow's neighborhood meeting with the city 3 minutes. Nouns first. We need temporary power policies explained, debris routes published by street, and a clear line between volunteer work and licensed work so no one gets hurt by goodwill. Jack timed me. 2:45, he said. Plenty of room to breathe. He's learned pace like a second language. By mid-afternoon, the room had turned into an orchestra of clipboards. Mr. Lopez's Dulce was sighted under a porch and rescued by a girl with a can of tuna and the kind of patience that should qualify for federal matching funds. Bin runs filled a pickup line in the parking lot like a polite parade. Elena printed no-door politics stickers because she has a wicked sense of humor and a healthy respect for creep. We stuck them to coolers in our own chests and, in one case, to a toddler who squealed and accepted the office. The adjuster's email finally pinged, confirming the emergency card. Elena handed it to me with a flourish and a caution. It buys tarps and motel nights, she said. It does not buy the feeling that everything is fine, that you purchase with soup and time. I put the card in my wallet like a tool, not a spell, light joke too. I prefer my magic on a simmer, I said. She grinned. We stock cinnamon for that. We closed with call and response tasks. Who's on meal rotation? 3 hands. Who's calling utilities? Sloan and Earl. Who's posting to the reunions page the teen with cat wrangling credentials? May rang a little bell that made us laugh. We adjourn, she said. Take your lists. Hydrate like it's a job. Back at the lot, Miss Ortiz's crew had already staged lumber like optimism stacked neatly. She walked me through Monday's planned demo at 8, framing by Wednesday if the inspector doesn't disappear into golf. Roofline tweak approved pending engineering stamp. She patted Joan the rosemary with hardened affection. This one's my foreman. I put a shallow dish by the roots water and thanks. Jack loaded our car with today's keeps labeled bins. The sainted Dutch oven, a shoebox of photos that still smelled like weekends, and we drove home the long way so the day could catch up with itself. Halter Creek's quiet hero shelf now featured a laminated sign, "Your receipts live here," courtesy of Elena, and a small jar labeled "Laundry Quarters, Take One. Return to when you can." Ched pretended not to notice how often people touched the jar like a relic. Evening asked for stew and silence. We obliged. I wiped the table with the reverence of someone who understands how crumbs can become evidence that a day fed people. Jack set out 2 bowls, then added a third because habit is generous. Miles showed up with a contractor's pencil behind his ear and a bruise of sawdust on his shirt. "Can I walk through Monday's checklist with you?" he asked. We did trash day, demo permit, neighbor alert about noise, ear protection. He did not make speeches. He wrote bullets. Sloan texted a photo of Earl grinning next to a stack of bins and the caption, "Tonight I learned what tote means." Quirky fact number 2. The crisscross pattern on construction pencils keeps them from rolling off sawhorses. They're stubborn on purpose. Someone thought, make a tool that resists gravity's little jokes. I want to meet that engineer and hand them a lemon bar. Night settled without fanfare. I called the Red Cross and the Blue Roof hotline. Both answered on the second ring with voices that sounded like thermostats steady. Adjustable. Here to keep you in a livable range. I set alarms for Ms. Ortiz's crew and for the city meeting. Elena texted the draft of a 1-page neighborhood ask for the council. Crisp as a starched shirt, I added a line about the library fund, the places that already save us quietly. Light joke 3. To the kettle as it sighed, we are a 2-soup, 3-clipboard household now. The kettle approved with a whistle that earned its pension. Before bed, I pinned the day's artifacts to my mental corkboard, a portable printer's hum. Dulce's whiskers twitching under a porch, the way Sloane's fingers found the rhythm of bins. The soft bell May rang to adjourn us back into lives we were rebuilding on purpose. I copied 3 lines onto the inside of the closet door because 3 a.m. loves a list. When fatigue lies. Let routine answer the phone. Civics taste like coffee, tape, and the word next. You don't rebuild alone, you schedule each other. The pawn outside practiced being undramatic. The house breathed like it had been hired. I set my alarm. Stroked the spine of the recipe tin for luck. And let sleep compose a plan I'd read in the morning light. Line by blue ink line. Until the roof on paper learned to stand in the air. Sunday began like a deep breath held by a town, the sort of quiet that isn't empty. Just lined up and ready. Jack poured coffee into travel mugs while I tucked index cards into my pocket debris route requests. Temporary power questions. A note to thank the library out loud. Miles texted. "We'll meet you at the gym. Sloan has the sign-in table." I smiled at the screen. Repentance with clipboards had slept well. The high school gym smelled like varnish and civic optimism. Rows of folding chairs faced a string of tables labeled with painter's tape utilities, permits, blue roof, volunteers, insurance appeals. Miss Lee from the library had set out a comfort card pens, tape, tissues, lemon drops, and a sign that made my ribs feel seen. Write legibly, "Your future self is tired." May floated through the aisles with her clipboard like a conductor tuning woodwinds. Miss Ortiz leaned on the stage, fielding roofline questions with a pencil behind her ear and a patience that ought to be billable. When the city liaison banged a gavel gym echo, dignified but friendly, my pulse put its shoulders down. I queued for public comment with my index cards held like a small boat when my turn arrived. I let the microphone find my vowels and kept the verb simple. "We need debris routes posted by street and day," I said. "We need a 1-page on temporary power, what's licensed, what's volunteer help, and how to keep people safe. We need inspectors' hours published like bus schedules so our contractors don't play golf with ghosts." The liaison nodded and wrote, "Which is government for Bravo." I closed with a thank you to the places that had saved us quietly. Please fund your library, your YMCA. and your rest stop shelf. They are already doing recovery, just with less applause. Academic phrase of the day: collective efficacy. The public argument that a neighborhood's capacity to recover comes from shared belief in we can, plus routines that convert that belief into action. It is not magic, it's practice. Clipboards, casseroles, clear scripts. Today. We can sound it like index cards whispered into microphones and returned as printed memos. After the Q&A, we pinballed table to table. Utilities stamped our work orders with red triangles, somehow reassuring. At Blue Roof, a corps sergeant with kind eyes described the schedule and handed me a magnet. Plastic sheeting is a promise, not a roof. Sloan ran the sign in like she'd been elected to it. Right street. Phone. What you need in 7 words. She coached an elderly man gently. 7 words is a kindness length. It keeps panic from writing a novel. Quirky sidebar: the gym's PA system was tuned for basketball, not speech. Consonants travel better than vowels in rooms with lacquer. That's why trash pickup landed and resilience turned into gentle soup. If you ever have to be heard in a gym, choose crisp words in work boots. We adjourned into sunlight that understood conference breaks. Jack pressed a granola bar into my hand like a union rule. Miles walked beside me with a new gait, less apology, more errands, while Sloan cross-checked a spreadsheet against her conscience. Utilities published the tetanus clinic hours, she said. I'll paste them to the community page and the relief tent, and I can run bin runs again Tuesday. Her eyes asked a question they were almost ready to word. I answered the way you answer a dog at the shelter, soft, present, without promising beyond your leash. Thank you, I said. Tuesday helps. Back at the lot, a Blue Roof crew measured the skeleton of my house as if it still had opinions. We'll sheet this today so rain plays nicely, the sergeant said. Contractor can demo undercover. He winked at Joan the Rosemary. Foreman's on duty. Light joke, one slipped out. Relieved of duty. She's union now, breaks at 10 and 2. The crew grinned and stapled promises in neat rows. Miss Ortiz arrived with 2 carpenters and a truck that smell testified to lumber. Permits queued, she said. Demo at 8 tomorrow if the inspector vanishes. I will summon him by reciting the code into a mirror. She knelt to eye the sill plates like a speech therapist, helping a sentence learn where to put its tongue. We'll strap the new frame so the wind has to take a number, she murmured. There are people whose competence lowers the weather inside your chest. Ortiz is one. Elder wisdom reflection. Accept help before you're eloquent. You do not have to audition for worthiness, sweat, grief. And a mailing address are enough. If someone insists you explain why you deserve a tarp, call a different table. We sorted more maybes into keeps. A handful of marbles from the junk drawer. They look suspiciously like hope. A dented pie tin, still serviceable. A photograph of my mother holding a cake that had collapsed but wore its frosting like armor. Sloan arrived with a roll of contractor bags over her shoulder like a proof of concept. For soft tosses only, she said. Reading the label, I'm learning bag dialect. Light joke too. May your garbage vocabulary expand and your cynicism shrink. She smiled. The kind that plays well in daylight. Mid-afternoon. The adjuster pinged my phone. Debris card activated. Elena. The administrative saint. Texted an annotated shopping list, mask cartridges. Work gloves. Knee pads. Electrolyte tabs. Skip the deluxe flashlight. Get 2 cheap ones so you can be generous. I read it aloud to Jack, who saluted and made the hardware store his hobby. Me called a 5-minute circle, hands on hips. Posture of colleagues. Tomorrow is loud. She warned. Drink water like it's your job. Ear protection mandatory. If you cry, cry. We sweep together at noon. She looked at me. You want a ritual? I nodded. We tied blue ribbons to the caution tape, one for each neighbor, fluttering like polite insistence. It felt theatrical and somehow, necessary. On the way back to Jack's, we detoured by the Halter Creek shelf. Rio had added a clipboard, "Need quarters, leave quarters." Beneath it, a note from a stranger. Tidy block letters. "A laundromat saved my job this week. Thank you. Night people." Chet pretended to rearrange Coco so he could blink privately. I put a roll of quarters in the jar and kissed my fingertips to the sign because gratitude is sometimes a small superstition. Evening asked for soup and scheduling. We spread Ortiz's timeline across the island demo Monday. Frame Wednesday. Inspection golf permitting Friday. Roofline the week after. I penciled in Thursday lemon bars for crew because morale is structural. Miles arrived with a contractor's pencil tucked behind his ear and a humility that travels without clanking. "I can be here at 8, he said. "What's my job? Ear protection. Runner. Bring donuts and the phrase, 'Where do you need me?' on repeat," I said. He nodded, wrote it down like a spell, and texted Sloan donut run plus tetanus flyers. She replied with a thumbs up and a donut emoji wearing a hero cape. A ping from the bank emergency disbursement posted. Another from the library. We found power strips and a few Chromebook loans if neighbors need forms. "Miss Lee," I sent back a little digital bow. A final ping from the Blue Roof Sergeant sheeting complete. Rain can mind its manners. I pictured the tarp shining a brave blue and felt something unclench that had been clenched since the crawl space. Quirky fact that tarp, the famous blue, is woven high-density polyethylene with UV inhibitors, strong for sun, loud in rain. The color wasn't ordained. It beat out silver and green because it photographs well for aerial assessment and makes crews easier to spot. If you nap under one, you'll dream in ocean. We ended the day with a small ceremony because days like this deserve punctuation. I placed the Polaroid of 19-year-old us rescued yesterday on the mantle in Jack's den. The edges had sanded themselves soft, but our faces held. Jack said peonies on sale. Receipt in the jar like a man who has accepted docking fees beside the picture. We stood there like people honoring a flag that keeps changing design but not meaning. Light joke 3, to the flowers. "You're the only thing in this house with a deadline." Jack shrugged. "Contractor says peonies can have Thursdays." We laughed the way you laugh when sleep is in the doorway and patience has set out pajamas. Before bed, I wrote 3 lines for the 3 a.m. self who collects sentences like spare screws. Blue roofs are promises, real roofs are calendars. If your hands are shaking, carry smaller things. Weekend is a job description, not a mood. The pawn outside kept its appointment with the moon. The house inhaled like it had confidence in tomorrow's scaffolding. I touched the recipe tin on the dresser. A little archive with opinions. And let my eyes close slowly. The way doors should when they know the frame will be there in the morning. Monday woke up wearing steel-toed boots. The blue roof winked its brave ocean color while Dawn practiced being practical. I put ear protection, a granola bar, and 3 index cards in my pocket rituals, make noise behave, and met Miss Ortiz at the curb just as her crew rolled up with demo trailers humming like low, competent bees. Miles arrived with a box of donuts and a contractor's pencil that had accepted citizenship behind his ear. Sloan followed with tetanus clinic flyers and the calm of someone who slept because she had a list. Ortiz clapped her hands once. A punctuation mark the size of a morning. "Safety brief," she called. Glasses on, gloves tight, ear pro in. "Walk your zone before you swing, no heroics. No assumptions. We make piles. We don't make surprises." She assigned lanes the way good teachers assign lab partners. I took the runner role with Miles Fetch. Label. Keep the water moving. Jack stood slightly back. The expression of a man tracking 100 small edges and willing them to stay kind. The first crowbar bite is always the loudest. Walls sighed into their second lives. Nails remembered they were temporary. dust lifted, thought about drama. Then sat down again, because Ortiz's crew kept the arena polite. I taped "Keep" on a shard of my old doorframe blue painter's tape, gives dignity to splinters, and propped it under Joan the Rosemary, who supervised like a green forewoman. "Break at 10, Ortiz announced. "Hydrate like you're billing hours." Light joke 1, I saluted with a water bottle and told her I'd submit timesheets to my kidneys. Elder wisdom reflection. The brain tries to turn demolition into mourning. Give it tasks until it learns the difference. When you pull, name the piece. When you toss, thank it for earlier shifts. Your hands will make peace faster than your metaphors. By 9:30, the inspector was a roomer in a white truck, then a silhouette at the corner, then a man in sunglasses who looked like he kept secrets for fun. "We're clean on permits," Ortiz said, handing over papers that smelled like toner and authority. He circled the sill plates, murmured about code sections like gossip, and tapped his tablet with the same rhythm grandchildren use on iPads. "Frame can begin after demo," he said. "Call me if the golf course calls me." He almost smiled. We let him keep his mystery. He had earned his consonants. Academic phrase of the day, procedural justice. The public argument that people comply more and heal better. When the process feels fair, explanations are clear. Voices are heard. Rules are consistent. It's debated in journals out here. It's a demo plan taped to a stud, an inspector who shows up, a crew lead who says what happens next. Fairness has a toolbox. Quirky sidebar, the T-pole you see after storms, the temporary power post with a meter. A weatherproof outlet, and a breaker is literally a little wooden T that rents electricity to a lot. Linemen call them temp services. Homeowners call them Eureka. They let crews run saws without playing extension cord hopscotch across 5 properties. Ours arrives Wednesday. I may bring it a ribbon. We broke at 10, per the gospel according to Ortiz. Donuts divided themselves along philosophical lines glazed for the optimists. Old fashions for the stoics. Sloan passed tetanus flyers like a deacon with programs. Miles knelt to pet Mr. Lopez's cat, Dulce, who had come to inspect our pastry ethics. Jack handed me coffee that tasted like negotiations closing on time. Over the hum, Ortiz pointed to the roofline. "We'll sister these rafters," she said. "Wind likes to grab there. I love professionals who talk about weather like a stubborn neighbor." A small lesson waited in the rubble. One of the crew found a shoebox of letters, edges furred with insulation, ink polite about surviving. I sat on the curb and let my lap be a table while Ortiz's second, Lou, brought me a gallon Ziploc like a nurse arriving with good news. "Bag and tag," he said. "Chain of custody for hearts." Light joke 2, I told him he'd make an excellent librarian. He bowed without disagreeing. The inspector surprised everyone by returning at noon. Either the golf ghosts were kind or Ortiz's paperwork had charmed his calendar. He watched 2 test nails, nodded at the strap layout, and signed a square of paper with the gravity of a bishop. "Proceed," he said, and the word lifted the air like a forklift. Ortiz called a short meeting. "We frame tomorrow," she said, tapping the plan. "We'll preload lumber this afternoon. Runners touch base with neighbors about truck noise at 7:30. Consent beats surprise." Miles looked at me, then at Sloan. "I'll do the porch knocks," he said. "Practice my sentences." He did high. "Framing tomorrow at 8. Noise will last until 2. Earplugs if you want. Lemon bars at noon because civic friendship." People smiled with their whole faces. Apologies with clipboards have a way of becoming invitations. The afternoon was a ballet of trailers and tarps. I sorted screws by size because order is a sedative, and because Elena's text said, "Sort twice, buy once." Jack and Lou chalked lines like tailors. Joan stood in her square of soil and looked satisfied, windproof leadership. Photosynthesis edition, when the sun decided it had said enough. We swept the slab with push brooms, slow arcs that taught my heartbeat to count to 4 again. Quirky fact: the scent of fresh-cut lumber is mostly alpha-pinene and bornyl acetate terpenes that say forest to your nose and calm down to your nervous system. There should be a candle called building back. In a pinch, a 2x4 and a hand plane will do. Near 5. We had our one scare, nothing operatic. Just a nail set where a boot wished it wasn't. Ortiz froze the frame with a palm. "Everyone stops," she said, voice low. Lou escorted the crewman to the shade, checked the sole, tweezed the offender, cleaned, bandaged, checked his tetanus status like a kindly drill sergeant. Work resumed only after the joke quota had been met. Light joke 3 from Lou. "That nail was trying to unionize your foot." The crewman laughed, which is the real clearance form. We closed the site with a little ritual May had taught us, tools counted aloud, cords coiled like obedient snakes, debris tarped, water dumped for the rosemary. Miles stacked sawhorses. Sloan labeled a bin brackets like order. Jack wrote tomorrow's first 3 tasks on a whiteboard propped against a stud 1-frame east wall. 2 donut diplomacy. 3 breathing. On the way to the car, Mr. Lopez waved me over to show Dulce curled under a lawn chair like a retired queen. "She approves of the blue roof," he said. "Says it flatters the sky." The cat blinked her whiskers in agreement. Cats are very good at taking credit for municipal improvements. Back at Jack's, Elena had left on the island a tidy envelope temporary power application pre-filled with the parts that make your brain tired. Sticky notes for my signatures, and a paperclip shaped like a house because she can't help herself. There was also a small bouquet of peonies with a receipt tucked into the jar labeled docking fees. Jack raised an eyebrow. I nodded approval like a harbor master stamping a logbook. Dinner was quiet stew and louder calendars. We wrote the week framing, inspection, roofers, library check-in, soup and clauses, rebuild edition on Sunday topic, how to read a contractor estimate without crying. Miss Lee texted that community room B was ours, and May added index cards provided before I could ask. Miles messaged a photo of porch notices taped straight, with the caption, "Practice my neat." Sloan followed with lemon bars baked. Practitioner level. Progress sometimes arrives with spatulas. Before bed, I stepped onto the porch and listened to a town that had the good manners to be tired. Somewhere a generator hummed like an apologetic refrigerator. A siren far off stated its case and then withdrew. The blue roof rustled against the evening with a confidence I was beginning to borrow. I thought about procedural justice again, how the inspector came back. How Ortiz explained before she ordered. How even the cat seemed to trust our process. I wrote 3 lines for the 3 a.m. version of me who likes homework. Fair processes sound like, here's what happens next. Demolition isn't grief, it's room service for the future. Hydrate. Tomorrow needs your verbs. I slid the card under the recipe tin. That small archive with opinions. The house exhaled. The pond practiced its low sermon about reflection. I turned off the lamp and let sleep approach the way good foremen do on schedule, with a clipboard, promising to wake me when the light remembers its job. Tuesday arrived with the purposeful racket of hammers clearing their throats. The blue roof shivered a little in the sunrise. Stapled promises holding steady while Miss Ortiz's truck nosed up with lumber that smelled like a forest trying out its city voice. I tucked earplugs and an index card into my pocket. Hugged Joan, the Rosemary forewoman. Union status pending and lined up water jugs like diplomacy. Miles came jangling with a tool belt he admitted was mostly pockets and hope. Sloan followed in work boots that had decided to be citizens. Jack brought coffee and the unshowy calm that makes schedules behave. Ortiz gathered us at the slab and patted the plan the way you pat a dog you trust. "Framing east and south walls today," she said. "We glue, we nail, we square. Chalk line is gospel, not suggestion. No heroics, all lifts have friends." Lou handed out pencils and a spirit level like communion. We bent to plates and studs, a choreography the wind could watch but not interrupt. The first wall stood up with the shy dignity of someone who has learned to walk again. We heaved together, knees the boss, backs the staff, and when it hit plumb, Ortiz slid the level up the stud and smiled. "That's a sentence," she said. "Subject, verb, period." We braced it. The bracing returned the favor. Light joke one I told the brace it had the job security of a librarian. And Lou said, "Shh," on reflex, which is how you know you've got the right crew. Elder wisdom reflection when you're rebuilding. Resist the ache for speed that calls itself relief. Squares before speed. Plumb before poetry, the house will remember the order you choose. So will your nerves. Do it true. Then do it fast. The future pays interest on patience. By 10. We'd lifted a second wall and chalk lines that made the slab look like graph paper. The inspector surprised nobody by showing up early. Sunglasses, clipboard, and a pocket copy of the code that probably sleeps under his pillow. He walked the plates, ran a finger along anchor bolts, and tapped a strap. "Good," he said. "Sister those rafters tomorrow. Hurricane ties on every other, don't make me guess. Call before noon. I'll choose you over 9 holes." He nearly smiled, which in inspector dialect is a standing ovation. Jack mouthed, "Wow, I wanted to embroider, 'Don't make me guess' on a pillow and mail it to City Hall." Quirky sidebar, ever wonder why carpenters call big framing nails 16D? The D stands for penny, from the Old English price for 100 nails. 16 penny nails were the big boys. The name stuck like sap. Today it's not a price, just a tradition that lets you sound like you inherited your hammer. Language, like lumber, carries old knots in useful ways. We paused for a water break beneath the maple that had voted to stay. Miles passed cups. Sloane stuck tetanus clinic flyers to a sawhorse with painter's tape because it's kinder to surfaces than duct tape. She's learning tape ethics. I am unreasonably proud. The neighbors drifted to the curb, murmuring yes at the geometry. Mr. Lopez held Dulce like an inconvenient purse. The cat tolerated our enthusiasm as a personal favor. Academic phrase of the day, resilience dividend. The public argument that when you build stronger than the minimum, you don't just avoid future damage, you earn everyday benefits, lower drafts, calmer bills, a door that doesn't throw tantrums in crosswinds. Critics call it expensive caution. Advocates say the extra screws pay rent quietly for years. Today, Ortiz framed for wind, not approval photos. My wallet gulped once, then behaved. Back on the slab, Lou snapped chalk like a tailor snaps thread. "Blue chalk for temporary, red for keeps," he said. "Red stains, blue forgives," he winked at Sloane. "Useful life tip." She laughed, catching the humor without letting go of the tape dispenser. Miles measured twice, cut once, then measured a third time because anxiety had opinions. The saw sang. A stud found its family. Jack kept the generator refueled with the attentiveness of a man who has decided gasoline is just a specialized tea. At noon, sharp, Ortiz declared a union of hunger and lemon bars. We sat in a row on a pile of sheathing and held paper plates like awards. Sloane's squares had the right ratio of tart to apology. Earl, the retiree, with the tape dispenser, arrived to run bin runs from the curb like a conductor, clipboard in hand, joy barely contained. He reported that Community Room B had sprouted another sign, "Write phone numbers like you mean them." Miss Lee's handwriting is a civic asset. I would vote for it for any office. We got a delivery nobody expected the temp power T-pole, riding in a utility truck like a wooden exclamation point. The lineman said it with an auger and a grin. "You'll have outlets by afternoon," one said. "Keep cords out of puddles. They're not baptismal." He stapled the meter on with the same pride people use on honor roll certificates. I considered ribboning the pole like a May Day tree. Light joke too. I asked if it had a christening name. "We call it Bill," he said, "because it makes everyone's day more expensive." Mid-afternoon. The rhythm settled cut, glue, nail, check square, breathe. Ortiz spoke to the building like a coach. Easy. Now. Find plumb. Tell the level the truth. The blue roof thumped now and then when wind went looking for mischief. It found straps, then minded its manners. Miles did porch knock diplomacy with a basket of earplugs and a rehearsed line, noise until 2, donuts at noon. We love you. He returned with empty earplug bags and full smiles. It turns out neighbors like to be warned more than they like silence. A small test of tempers arrived in a glossy brochure, a different contractor. Smelling like hard sell and citrus. Wandered up to tell us we were doing it wrong, that he could slap a shell up in a week. Easy. Ortiz handed him her card without a blink. We don't slap shells, she said. We build homes that can argue with wind. He sniffed, muttered ladies, and left to hunt for someone more gullible. My spine put its shoulders down. Light joke 3. Whispered to Joan if he were a spice, he'd be unsalted air. The rosemary consented with fragrance. We set the last brace around 4:30. The walls made a box that felt like a sentence finishing its clause. Jack took a photo from the street, from that angle. You could already see a front door with manners. Ortiz checked the fasteners like a violinist tuning a last string. Inspector at 10 tomorrow, she said. If he says yes. We fly rafters by lunch and make the wind learn our names. Miles wiped his hands on his jeans and looked at me like a person measuring growth by millimeters. I like this, he admitted. It's loud and patient. Sloan slid a sticker onto his hard hat, no door politics in Miss Lee's font. He laughed. I deserve that. It's a souvenir, she said, for the day you showed up and used your inside voice on outside problems. The temp power clicked to life with a polite thunk. We plugged in a shop fan for the crew and, just because we could. A string of cheap lights under the blue roof that made the slab look like a holiday whose gift is procedure. Elena texted a photo of Community Room B reserved for next Sunday's Soup and Clauses Rebuild Edition, How to Read and Estimate Without Crying. Agenda attached scope. Allowances, draws, liens, change orders, warranty. I forwarded it to 3 neighbors who have already survived too much persuasion. Quirky fact number 2. House wrap the white stuff with brand names in big letters looks like plastic. But it breathes microporous film that blocks liquid water yet lets water vapor escape. It's a tiny miracle of pore geometry, like a colander that hates rain but loves steam. Ortiz prefers the kind with fewer logos. No free ads, she says. I like a contractor with aesthetic ethics. We swept the slab in widening arcs. A ritual that felt like priming a page. Mr. Lopez brought Dulce over in a harness she tolerated like a retired queen meeting the new parliament. The cat inspected the broom, approved the fan, and blinked a benediction at the level. The inspector may have the final say, the cat has the first. As we were packing up, a text arrived from the city liaison debris routes posted, your street weddy fry. Inspector's hours published. Miracle Elena added, I framed the PDF, Miss Lee. I pictured the flyer in the library window, tape perfect, corners crisp, and felt the room in my rib cage neaten itself. Dinner at Jack's tasted like gratitude in broth. We ate with hands that remembered screws and squares and a day that had done what it promised. Miles swung by after his shower, hair damp, bearing donuts in a bag he wouldn't let drip on the plans. Earplug diplomacy report successful, he said. Also, I'm sorry again for the night I said privacy. I'm learning doors. I let the apology land without making it a ceremony. Then we're both learning, I said. I'm learning roofs. Before bed, I wrote 3 lines for the 3 a.m. Me, who sometimes thinks patience is a rumor. Build for wind you have, not weather you wish. Red chalk is forever. Choose your lines accordingly. Squares before speed, plum before poetry. I tucked the card under the recipe tin little archive, big opinions, and stood at the window a while. Out there, the frame of tomorrow waited, braced and believing. The blue roof rustled like a book you love turning a page. Inside, Jack rinsed mugs with the quiet competence of someone who knows the day earned sleep. I turned off the lamp and let the dark do its favorite job, hold the outline steady while morning finds the rest. Wednesday put its hard hat on and cleared its throat. The inspector arrived at 9:58 with sunglasses that had seen things and a clipboard that believed in sequence. Miss Ortiz stood by the east wall like a maestro about to cue brass. He ran a finger over straps, squinted at anchor bolts, and nodded at the squareness like a man complimenting a well-ironed shirt. "Proceed," he said. "The nicest verb in construction. Hurricane ties on every other. No mysteries at the ridge." He almost smiled. The air stood up straighter. Lou chalked a neat line on the slab. "Rafters fly at 11, he said. "Glue, nail, breathe, repeat." Jack set the temp power fan to a cooperative hum. Miles delivered donuts door to door like diplomacy with sprinkles. Sloane handed out earplugs and a one-page titled, "What Will Be Loud and When." She'd bolded the hours. The neighbors appreciated punctuation. The first pair of rafters went up as if the building had rehearsed in secret. 4 of us lifted. Ortiz whispered, "Let the level tell the truth," and the bubble, sweet tyrant that it is, found center. We toenailed, tied, and braced. The blue roof above us flicked its cobalt sleeve and settled, now shading workers instead of shame. Light joke 1, I told the hurricane ties they had the charisma of seatbelts. Lou patted one. "Charisma paid the electric bill," he said. Even the inspector's mouth conceded a 0.5 millimeter of cheer. Elder wisdom reflection. When the work is heavy, don't ask your courage to be impressive. Ask it to be scheduled. Courage at 11. Courage at 2. Courage again. Tomorrow. Repetition is a bridge. Heroics are a trampoline. By noon, a ridgeline existed where grief had underlined nothing. Ortiz called lunch like a union hymn. We ate on sawhorses, lemon bars, sandwiches. A bowl of oranges that had committed to being sunshine. Mr. Lopez's cat, Dulce, made an inspection tour, tail like a metronome. Miles scratched behind her ears. "I like this version of loud," he said. It believes in Thursday. He meant the weekly hinge audits at home. The way a day can teach you, it will keep coming if you give it chores. Academic phrase of the day, path dependence. The public argument that once you choose a process, the process chooses some of you back. Early decisions narrow later options. Rails late in the morning, guide trains at dusk. We set rails today, ties every other. Strap spacing, porch overhang trimmed to face the wind. Not the brochure. Tomorrow gets easier because today picked a spine. Quirky sidebar carpenter's pencils aren't round because job sites have gravity and mischief. Their flat sides keep them from rolling off and declaring independence. The graphite is rectangular too, so you can sharpen with a utility knife. Some folks notch one end to scribe 3/8 in a hurry, pencil as ruler. Pencil as rumor. Earl donated 2, I knighted him again, ceremonially, with blue tape. The only drama auditioned at 12:47 when the wind tried a solo. A gust lifted the blue roof edge like a child testing limits. Ortiz pinned it with 2 hands and 1 sentence. Clamp it now. Lou and Miles moved as if choreographed by weather school grips, cleats, a row of staples finding their beat. The tarp sighed and remembered who pays rent. Light joke 2. I told the gust to submit its concerns in writing. Joan the rosemary released a fragrance that read like approval. At 1. The inspector did an encore. He checked the ridge connector good and pointed at one strap end. 2 more nails, he said. 2. Not many, not 0. I like a man who counts like a metronome. Not a poet. We nailed them and watched his shoulders agree with ours. Sloane returned from the library with Miss Lee's laminator still warm. She held up 2 signs like Awards Debris Routes, WDFRI, and Temp Power Safety. Also, she added, Community Room B has whiteboard markers that actually work. A miracle. She has learned the true liturgy of recovery coffee. Tape, markers, copies. We stuck 1 laminated sheet to a stud with painter's tape because even signs deserve quality of life. Jack took a call on speaker from Elena. Soup and Claus's Rebuild Edition agenda set, she reported. Scope versus allowance, change orders, lien releases, warranty reading out loud. Miss Ortiz agreed to explain the difference between estimate and promise. Miss Lee will police markers. I exhaled gratitude. When a town names its confusions and assigns teachers, the weather in your chest clears. Mid-afternoon. I did the porch knock rounds with Miles, noise until 2. We said in a practice duet, earplugs if you like. Lemon bars at noon, oranges at 3. Inspector returns Friday. Rafters fly today. We were chairs that speak. An older man in a ball cap asked, You got straps? Last time the wind ate my carport. Straps and code. Miles answered. Also stubbornness. The man grinned. Stubbornness holds a roof better than luck. Toward 4. We set the last pair of rafters and stood back. The frame cast a shadow shaped like future. Ortiz ran her hand along the ridge like a person reading Braille. House knows its name again, she said. Jack took a photo with his phone and didn't send it to anyone. Some pictures are for your ribs first. We closed the site with the ritual that has turned my nerves into a town employee tools accountant. Cords coiled, straps double-checked, broom arcs broad and slow. Sloane labeled a bin fasteners that think they're special. Miles packed earplug diplomacy leftovers into a zip bag for tomorrow. Doles blinked good governance from her lawn chair throne. The inspector waved from his truck drive-by benediction, and we all felt a centimeter taller. On the way to Jack's. We detoured by Halter Creek. Rio had added a paper cup dispenser by the quiet hero shelf, hydration is a language. And a new note appeared on the clipboard, thank you for the quarters. Got the dryer working, Elo kept the job. Night shift linen tech. I touched the pen to the paper like a tiny toast and wrote, keep the change when kindness costs time. Dinner was stew that knew its verbs simmer. Steady, serve. We ate with the soft-edged appetite of people who have hauled nouns all day. When the bowls were empty, we spread an evening's worth of paper on the island. First, the FEMA portal. Elena's post-it walked me through Inhuman. Second, Ortiz's updated schedule house wrap Friday. Sheathing Monday. Inspections plural, like commas. Third, my statement for Sunday's Class A, 10-minute tour of your estimate. Jack timed me. 9:02, he said. Plenty of oxygen. Miles asked if he could speak for 2 minutes about what I meant by boundaries and why doors are better. I said yes. Sloane asked if she could run sign-in and color code questions by category. Yes, please. And I meant the please. Light joke 3. To the kettle while it reached for a whistle were a 2 soup, 5 clipboard, 1 rosemary household now. The kettle hit its note like consent. Joan, on the porch, absorbed moon and municipal pride. Before bed, I wrote the 3 a.m. prescription and taped it to the inside of the closet door. Courage at 11. At 2, again tomorrow. 2 more nails change weather, count them. A roof is a choir of small decisions in tune. Then I stood a moment at the window. Out there. The frame held its breath and its plum. The blue roof rustled like a book turning a page with care. A utility truck yawned 2 streets over. Inside. Jack rinsed bowls with the competence that makes rooms exhale. I touched the recipe tin, the little archive with opinions, and felt something uncomplicated rise, like steam, a sense that tomorrow would be loud. Yes. And also patient, that my house had gone from past tense to present progressive, that I could sleep without narrating the wind. The lamp clicked. The dark did its good work. In that private theater, the new rafters stretched. The straps hummed their quiet safety song. And the door I don't yet have practiced its future manners, open when asked, closed without drama, honest on the hinges. Thursday wore bright tape and fresh markers. House wrap arrived in a roll that looked like a polite billboard. Lou and Miss Ortiz skated it up the frame, stapling a soft drum beat while the blue roof rustled approval above. The inspector, our sunglassed metronome, walked the sheathing, traced circles around fasteners with a pen that has probably frightened poets, and nodded at the tidy overlaps. Water will have to send a certified letter, he said, in his dialect. That's joy. By 10. The porch had manners again, a temporary step, a threshold of 2x4s. A place where a door will one day practice honesty. Miles mounted the donated mailbox like a man installing an apology in metal. Sloan labeled a clear bin hardware with delusions and slid it under the sawhorses. Jack strung a line of work lights beneath the blue roof humble constellations that said, "Stay a little, it's okay." At noon, we shifted to the library soup and clauses rebuild edition. Community Room B smelled like coffee that believes in neighborhoods. Miss Lee wielded working whiteboard markers with priestly restraint. Elena handed out a one-pager, how to read and estimate without crying. Miss Ortiz drew rectangles for scope, allowances, draw schedule, and lien releases, narrating like a field guide. An estimate is not a poem, she said. It should survive a calculator. I took my 10 minutes what a change order is and isn't. Why allowances need daylight. Which red flags belong in compost. Miles stood for 2 minutes on boundaries that include doors. Sloan ran sign-in with color-coded questions that would make a city clerk blush with pride. Academic phrase of the day: disaster capitalism. The public argument that after crises, some folks try to monetize grief with inflated bids, predatory loans, or rushed privatization while communities are distracted. The room hummed. We all had brochures to show. Our counterspell wasn't outrage. It was scripts, calculators, witnesses, and a librarian who can laminate hope. Quirky sidebar clipboard springs are rated in pound force. Cheap ones fatigue fast and fling papers like confetti. Miss Lee special orders the industrial kind quiet torque that refuses to let a list escape. She let me test one. It felt like fidelity disguised as office supply. Back at the lot. The afternoon practiced sturdiness. Ortiz tuned the opening's window squared. The front door framed with a threshold that knew its job. "We'll hang solid core," she said. "Wind respects mass." She stapled a strip of flashing like a sword swallower with manners. The inspector texted final exterior pass tomorrow, inside to follow. My ribs read the message and stood up straight. Miles crossed the slab with a small velvet pouch. "A key," he said, flushing. "To our place. Tag says door, not moat. Sleep, laundry, nap, even if we're out. No asking." He held my eyes like a man who's letting a sentence finish. I took the key and the tag and the new grammar. "Then you come over here Thursdays," I said, "for hinge audits." "Bring your pencil," Sloan added, softly, "and lemon bars." Light joke, one good. Inspectors eat those for breakfast. Even the blue roof rustled a laugh. Elder wisdom reflection. Forgiveness is a parade of small right things, not a ribbon cutting. Let people carry chairs before you ask them to carry trust. Let them keep carrying them after the cameras leave. At 3, Jack surprised me with 2 envelopes. The first held a simple spare floor plan sketch he'd made at the Island Sun where I like it. A built-in shelf for the recipe tin. A window seat for Joan the Rosemary when winter makes outdoor leadership inconvenient. The second wasn't a ring. It was a page of promises, adopting rules for the life we were building, calendars on the table. No heroic surprises. Flowers on the 15th with receipts in the jar. And the last line in blue ink, will you share roofs and patience? I answered on the page where it belonged. Yes, on condition of soup. Light joke, too. He initialed it like a man who has tasted soup and understands the law. We said a small ritual at dusk. The neighbors drifted over Earl with industrial tape. Mr. Lopez with Dulce in her harness. May with a bell. Miss Lee with a basket of pens. Elena with laminated copies of the debris route. Ortiz with hands that smell like usefulness. We stood in the framed doorway and read the House Constitution aloud, the clauses about council, door manners, Thursday hinges, and no door politics. The blue roof breathed, the house wrap lifted and settled like a modest curtain. We tied a ribbon around the temp power pole and named it Bill. Per lineman lore, May rang her bell. Adjourn, she said. Same miracle tomorrow. Night asked for the long, humane summary of a day that had kept its promises. Jack made soup that respected carrots. Miles set 3 bowls. Sloane stacked plates like a humble punctuation mark. We ate in the cadence of people who have learned that appetite and hope share a pantry. After. I took my first slow walk alone through the framed house. The rooms told me their intentions without demanding mine. The front window wanted a chair for reading mail. The kitchen asked for a hook where grief could hang its hat and behave. The bedroom requested a quilt heavy enough to keep weather outside its jurisdiction. On the porch, Jack handed me the Polaroid of us at 19, now pressed flat in a small frame salvage from the thrift store. Where do you want our old weather? He asked. By the new door, I said, so it can practice leaving and staying. We propped it on a stud where the future trim will live. Dulce blinked at it like a curator. Joan, forewoman, scented the air with agreement. We finished the day at Halter Creek, because gratitude keeps office hours there. Rio had posted a fresh card, your receipts live here and your stories. A new note in tidy caps read, borrowed quarters, kept the shift, gave them back with interest. Night shift, linen tech. Chet pretended to rearrange Coco. I pretended not to notice his eyes. On the drive home, the town looked like what it is, a place that has chosen rails over drama. Porch notices straight, debris piles staged for Wednesday and Friday, a librarian's tape everywhere, in the good way. We parked, and Jack turned to me with a quiet question that had finally found its day. Do you want to keep one address after the roof? Yes, I said. If it has room for soup and clauses, hinge audits, and peonies with receipts. He extended his hand like a contract. I shook it like a vow. Light joke 3. To the kettle, we're adding a tea line to the estimate. The kettle whistled quorum. Before sleep, I wrote 3 lines for the version of me who will wake at 3 and ask whether this is real. The frame held in weather today. So did you. Keys are promises with teeth. Share them wisely. Tomorrow is inspection and oranges. Breathe like a schedule. The house exhaled blue roof rustle. Fan hum. A pond practicing the moon under the recipe tin. I slid the yes on condition of soup and let the dark do its gentle carpentry while morning sharpened its pencil. Now the days move with an intentional quiet. The blue roof folding and unfolding its soft breath over framed rooms. The house wrap whispering along the studs like a curtain learning its part. The porch light practicing patience while neighbors tie ribbons to temp poles and taped crisp notices to borrowed sawhorses. We went from sirens to schedules, from a parking lot sleep to a key that says door, not moat. We learned to name what matters in the unglamorous grammar of safety scope: strap, tie, witness, receipt, and we passed those words hand to hand until the block began to steady itself. In Community Room B, where coffee counts as liturgy, we read estimates out loud until the numbers behaved, and we gave predatory brochures nowhere soft to land. We watched a son carry chairs without speeches, and a woman who once chose privacy learned the kind of boundary that lets a gate swing. We watched a contractor explain wind with her pencil and an inspector grant the day's next verb with the smallest smile. We watched a librarian laminate hope, a clerk keep quarters like sacrament, a rosemary bush supervise a job site with photosynthesis and humor. A house is returning by inches and agreement's rafters in tune, squares before speed, plum before poetry, and the kitchen that will live there already knows its vow soup beat signatures. Peonies come with receipts. Thursdays belong to hinges. And the door will be honest on its frame. Love, too, is returning in scheduled ways. A page of promises in blue ink. A yes on condition of soup. A key passed without speeches. Calendars shared on the island where plans and appetite shake hands. So breathe in for 4, slow and forgiving. The way dawn opens without hurrying, and breathe out for 6, longer and kinder. The way a roof learns to hold weather while sleep crosses the room on quiet feet and keeps the watch until morning.